going to do the meditation that I need. So let's close our eyes and melt into the chair. Melt, 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 melt every part of the body, every part of the mind. Melt into the chair, melt the feet into the floor, melt the mind into the space. And any place there's a contour of the body or some edge in experience, breathe into it. See if it can be encouraged to melt as well. Don't force anything. That whatever can rest, rest, but no more. Just what's willing to let go. Take a few deep breaths here, just enjoying whatever warm, positive, peaceful sensations arise from just relaxing a little bit. Maybe just this even momentary relax changes our attitude to be a little more positive. Maybe a little smile comes up. Maybe our nervous system tunes down. You just notice that. And we realize that anything that's not resting, anything that's not willing to relax and let go, probably has some grievance against the world, against what is. Something isn't exactly right. And what I'm inviting us to do is just to give an attitude, or touch those parts with an attitude of simple, warm acceptance. We're not trying to solve anything. We're not trying to wake up not trying to grow up. Just love what is. Be part of experience that's a little more sharp. Any sensations indicating tension or friction. Any place in the body that might be trying too hard. It's just how it is right now, and that's okay. For me, this type of acceptance or the simple love of what is sometimes brings up some grief or heartbreak. We welcome those too. Often that's the lubricant that's required for more tension to relax. And when you're ready, see if you can move from accepting specific things, specific thoughts, specific edges and frictions to relax attention, relax into the space, and then applying the same attitude towards everything. Whatever comes up right now, whatever the entire shape of the space is, good and bad, tense and relaxed. Now we are resting not just into the chair or into the floor or into the space, but into a loving space. As if as we relax on the ground, find a ground or a groundless ground, you also notice the quality of love that's embedded in it. How much we can relax and let go into that, feeling held by love and acceptance. And see from here you can also find and rest into the group's heart, finding your own heart's own heart point, tuning into it, and maybe you also feel the song of our collective heart, of each individual heart being with us here in our session. Together, both creating and resting into a field of loving acceptance. Even if you don't feel anything, just the intention is enough. We're going to take another minute here to rest into our collective heart. You can nurture it, or you can breathe into it. Just enjoy exactly as it is. From here, from this safe, peaceful place, without opening your eyes, I want you to entertain this inquiry. Last week we were talking about what is always true for you. What is always right about the world or about yourself? And now I want to invite us into an inquiry that can feel even deeper, more fundamental to our world model. The simple question, what is true? And I'm not so much talking about a random relative observation like the sky is blue. Because, of course, everyone knows the sky is blue during the day, and the blueness is not a quality of the sky, so to speak, but just an effect of the light moving through the atmosphere. And at night, it gets more gray and black. What is ultimately true? What is true all the time? What do you really believe about this world? And just this exploration can loosen up some old beliefs, or maybe again bring some grief up, and that's really okay. That's a lot of what this practice is for. If you really are hitting on some ground level belief, just notice it. We'll explore that in a minute. you haven't found anything, try to consider what is true or would be true even if you were not alive. What will be true after you die? What is true even if we had no measurement tool? What is objectively true regardless of perspective? Before you open your eyes, I want you to take one last dip into the loving, warm space of the collective heart. Open your eyes when you're ready. Before we talk about what's ultimately true, say that as per the subject of today's chapter, what's emptiness, I want to first talk a bit about this notion of emptiness. So, a few hundreds of years after what many consider to be the original Buddha, Gautama Buddha, the guy from all the suttas, there was what was called the second turning of the wheel. The major star of Nagarjuna championing emptiness and this notion of nothing being ultimately true. Or otherwise, every concept, every notion, everything that we call true, only being relatively true, even creating this type of practice of way of seeing that uses what we consider to be ultimately true as a pointer towards attachment, as a pointer towards the place where we suffer. Generally speaking, this notion of emptiness, this mark of existence or the skillful pointer, was created as a response to what was a proliferation of all sorts of views based on earlier Buddhism. If you look through the Buddha's teachings, if you look through the suttas, the only thing that's mentioned as somewhat of an ultimate is nirvana, nibbana, fundamental consciousness. But then all sorts of other views started coming up despite the Buddha's best efforts. And so emptiness was an attempt at creating a self-terminating pointer. Maybe you've heard emptiness is also empty, or emptiness and form are the same, or you could say non-dual. It was an attempt to create something a little more sophisticated than the earlier thinking about how to point the path to people. And of course, I'm sure most of you know that Buddhism is not a religion. It's not a metaphysics. It's not even a philosophy. It's a soteriological system, I think is an adequate way of describing it. It's a system describing liberation and what is it that we are liberating from. It's more of a method, it's more of a series of skillful pointers than this is what's true. Let me see if I want to say more about this before we go back to what is true. Yes. And so what Buddhism concerns itself with is never ontology. It's only epistemology. And the simplest way that I know how to define ontology is what is, versus epistemology, which is how we know. So ontology speaks to an absolute, what is, versus how we know, which relies on process. If we ask someone how they know something, ultimately it needs to, if they're intellectually honest, if they're available and capable of doing this exploration, it will always comes back to, this is what's happening through my senses. This is what's showing up in this thing that I'm calling space of awareness. And then I'm noticing patterns. I know because it's happening again and again. And I know, and I'm calling it a pattern because that's just a useful way of describing the thing. And then I'm noticing patterns of patterns, and I'm giving them names. And the error or the trap that we fall into is when we take a pattern or a pattern of patterns, we call it some name, and decided that's what is. Which I remind you, how we discussed this in the last session with the aggregates in motion, or the 12 links of dependent origination, where we take a few sensations, we slice them into this and that. It's vijnana, or discerning consciousness. We build them up into form. We cognize about it. We make it into a thing. We feel something about the thing. The thing is good or bad, and it's pleasant and unpleasant. And then acts of coordination take those lumps of sensations, right? Some of them, of course, coming from our actuators, some of them coming from perception, and all the other modalities. And we make them into actions in the world, actions of perception and behavior. And then we take those acts of coordination, those samskaras or coordinators, and then we use them as the forms for the next round of processing. And this happens again, and loops within loops within loops within loops within loops. So this practice of emptiness is the direct counter practice or attitude, direct counter to this everlasting construction. And when we speak about fundamental consciousness, the thing from which all of those undefined and non-delineated sensations come up, in Pali, one word for nibbana, or fundamental consciousness, is nipapancha, not papancha. Papancha being the process that I just described, of the continuous looping and building and loops within loops, dreams incepted within dreams. So having said all of this, and by way of somewhat setting up a trap for you, what is ultimately true? What is true? What is always true? What is the correct thing?
I did not find anything in the meditation.
Yeah, that definitely happens. And without saying anything about you, of course, I don't know your experience. Many of those beliefs are unconscious. We only run into them when they're threatened. So I'm not necessarily expecting anyone to jump in and say something like, consciousness is real and true, or gravity, or it's okay, even if you have one and you don't want to jump in.
I sort of like I'm sort of like torn between whether to say something or not, because what I think of as ultimately true is not really a thing. It's not it's kind of what we're talking about, emptiness and all of that. But it's a particular way of seeing. It's the mind realizing that it is creating its own world, kind of. That can be said as, it's like the ultimate truth is that nothing is sort of like ultimately true. Nothing is true or something like that. That everything is only relatively true.
Uh,
But
and what
that's,
mhm.
no, go ahead.
And what is true?
That's, well, that's just the mind's kind of, it's the mind realizing a pattern, like, and so like the ultimate pattern is that it's all patterns, kind of like that. But it's not
And what
that, yeah,
is ultimate?
that it goes beyond all the other patterns. It kind of encapsulates the working of the mind itself as um as the ultimate pattern, the biggest pattern. Like there's nothing.
And what is goes beyond?
Um,
So I want you to notice that every time I ask a question, there's of course the habit of the mind to try to go and explain it using some other concept.
mhm.
But every time I'm also noticing there's like a hit of the solution of the previous holding of the concept. This is the de-reification of it. So
Also,
I'm gonna ask that again, and I want you to tune into this sense of subtle relaxation that happens.
uh,
What is true? The word true. What is it? What is it? What does it point to?
well, I'm noticing what you're asking me to notice, like the solution. So I'm no longer,
Yeah,
if I was asking a question or answering a question before in terms of using true as a way of explaining, once
yeah,
you ask me about what is true, I have to let go of that and I sort of like land into
exactly.
nothing.
And yeah, and stay with the nothing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So let's try this together for a moment. Even when we think about the nature of this question, what am I even asking? What does it mean? What is true? True. Ultimate is.
Something to come to my mind is that when you say what is true, I guess what is reality, what is factual,
Mhm.
without kind of any superimposing anything, then maybe something like this exists. But for our subjective reality, how can we even understand that? How can we comprehend that? So it's kind of this subjective reality that we have. I mean, I come to the conclusion for myself that I probably don't know what it is. I won't be able to grasp it.
Well, we're grasping it the best way that we know.
Yeah,
And even though this claim or this pointer of emptiness also corresponds to no inherent meaning or to no inherent existence or own being, own independent existence, things do have relative existence, which we can then agree on. The more that we know that everything that we delineate and express and thingify only exist in consensus, whether the consensus is internal or between more beings, the less we suffer, the less there's anything to go to war about. Jen, was there something you wanted to ask?
I was just gonna try to answer your question, but then you did the exercise and it shifted. So well, I guess okay, initially it felt like what is true is that there's this appearance like this is true. Like I feel like this stuff is here.
Which stuff?
Like all this sensations and air and space. Well, I don't know if it's air, but there's something. There's kind of something I'm here. I can experience.
And where is here?
It's everywhere that I like put in my spatial kind of field of what's like accessible, which is about for me, it's about like maybe a 20-foot circle. Outside of that, it's as if there's nothing there. I don't even think about it. It's as if the world's not out there.
So here is always relative to where you look.
Yeah. Or here or something.
Mm-hmm. And so do you see, let me ask this differently. So what about that is ultimately true? Which part is always correct?
Which part is always correct?
What is always true?
Well, I wasn't sure once you said if we die, but before that, it feels like in my life, there's always something to be experienced.
Mm-hmm. So now we're sort of skirting the line between ontology and epistemology. Because what you're saying is I can read more as I'm noticing that there's something, right? And even that something is just a pointer at an ineffable, and it keeps happening. And there's an experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that it's not still useful to poke at it like we just did. And ultimately, it is true that as you de-reify the mind and let go of all sorts of assumptions, there's also a recognition of the lack of ultimate spatial reference point.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Because when you said, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Because then you said, what is, and then you said it in a particular way, what is true or something. And then, and then I was like, oh, and then it felt like things, it did feel like emptied out. And then I was like, it's like, there's this art piece that I saw recently of like layers of translucent glass, but then I think there's a pattern or something in the glass. So you look at it, it looks as if there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of felt like, oh no, there's nothing to grab onto, kind of. It felt less solid than the first answer I had. But it comes with fear, so I think I don't normally go there.
Mm-hmm. To continue my thought from earlier, if we can continually be in tune with this continuous happening or ceaseless manifesting, and notice that part of the manifesting is our calling it names, trying to grab it some way, that's where we want to be. We want to be in contact with the continuous arising with the least amount of mediation. So rather than living in the virtual world of there is a world and there is a person inside of it and the identity and the agendas, right? And all of that papancha, all of those loops of meaning constructed and nested inside of one another, We want to experience from before all of those layers that we forget that we've mounted in the back of our minds and are looking through. Look for before. And then there's a way that we truly, and in a way that we cannot fool ourselves, see that it's just continuously changing, manifesting, moving thing that is completely undefinable in any ultimate sense, right? Of course, it's definable in the, oh, we're on Zoom. Okay, sure. Right? We see that as a construct of mind. And the trick here of emptiness is that as soon as we see that the word truth, that this notion of a self, that anything that we've thingified through this process of papancha is made of smaller bits that are not it, and then ultimately made of what we could call fundamental consciousness or sensory bits, right? Even that a designation, of course. Then those objects, those acts of coordination can no longer grab, which is the important piece. And that also corresponds to the experience that I was pointing to earlier when I was like, what is true? It's sort of it's like a magic spell. It's like waving a wand at the word, and poof, like it loses the entrenched meaning. And suddenly all of the underlying sensations, all of the multiple acts of coordination that had to grab the body and mind to solidify a meaning of truth, just relax a little bit. And of course, we can do that by way of inquiry in this continued way. And that's a lot of what Nagarjuna and the Emptiness Gang did at the beginning. And it's beautiful practice. But in this path, having to do with basis of operation and a continuous expansion as a default, this tool is something we only use for the very hard rocks of perceptions, like the most tangled knots. And we understand that simply holding the more expanded perspectives is like a continuous seeing through at least the more subtle layers of verification. And so we get a sort of automatic emptiness. And so instead of plucking out weed after weed, the base of operation is like a lawnmower. It's just like continuously shaving off beliefs, meanings, and ideas. It shows us what's underneath. All right. Any questions about this so far? Yeah.
I think there's in a Robert Bale lecture I listened to on emptiness where he described how like an intellectual understanding of emptiness is not the same thing as a direct experience of it. And that's something I've always had trouble with, because like as going through the exercise you're describing, I noticed both like the intellectual engagement with it, and yet I also notice how I was thinking earlier today while reading the chapter about how engagement with this perspective has had probably more of a profound effect on my life than any other philosophy. And so that seems experiential rather than just intellectual. But for me, like it's so continuous rather than like discrete intellectual versus experience that I kind of don't know what I'm looking for, other than it seems like I'm seeing it, but there's no I don't really notice much of a differentiation between the concept and the experience.
So there's also no such thing as emptiness, right? Again, it's like a magic wand. It's a thing like all others. Emptiness is empty. And so, of course, you have the intellectual understanding of emptiness, right? It's something that you know the workings of. You have a sense of this thing built from things, constructing things. When I imagine that when Rob points at the experience of emptiness, I actually wanted to bring this up a little later, is either the sort of experience that we're pointing to when we're like poking a hole into the balloon of the word true. You're like, oh, it's empty. Oh, thank God. Ugh. Or sometimes people say the mind is empty, or an experience of emptiness when the mind is particularly empty as a result of some practice, even just mind collectedness practice, ultimately can go into very empty and deconstructed spaces. Or because you had some insight or some big awakening, what I prefer to call a tear in the net of mind, Tibetan term. Like something is loosened up so much and there's a hole, and it's just the net of mind has a hard time coagulating again and tensing up, and you're like, and sometimes for an hour, some people for a few weeks, they go and it's like, I don't have an identity, I don't have a self, I don't have a, right? That they're just, the stuff that they're used to is not there. So sometimes you can call that, or degrees of that, empty mind. But I don't like those terms because they're very non-specific, right? There's so many things that we can point to by saying, is the mind empty, or the experience of emptiness, right? There's no experience of emptiness. You might feel this flavor of sensations. You might feel the thing that we call peace. You might feel the thing that later we put on a designation of emptiness. But emptiness is not a thing. It's not an experience, right? By itself. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like maybe looking for something specific, which is, like a boundary layer, which is ironic here, right? Looking for the specific thing instead of noticing the lack of specificity.
Yeah. And that's what we do all the way down. That's just it. And these types of questions, these types of attempts at wrestling, where is emptiness? Am I doing emptiness? Is this the experience of emptiness? And holding it with this attitude, with this perspective, is what ultimately helps it loosen, right? We have this attitude of emptiness, and we also have this commitment of being in tune with everything that's happening in our bodies and minds in the least mediated way. So just feeling the sensations, just feeling the sensory bits, right? And the more we feel those, and the faster we feel those, the more fine we feel those, the more we know experience is less mediated. So we can go directly into the peace that comes from emptiness practice versus having a thought and then experiencing the body through an idea of, I'm having an emptiness experience. Because that's going the other way. I see the extreme lack of satisfaction on your face.
I wouldn't describe it as that. Or as uh, noticing my sensations while listening to you, and the sensation of hearing you, and then putting words to those, and noticing that then that's reifying the sensations into concepts like emotions, and then like catching myself doing that and then going back into the sensations.
I'm sorry if I mischaracterize you. I'm just poking.
Resting dissatisfied face.
Okay, so I want to show you something nice. One of my favorite art pieces. I have a couple in my home because often people come and they like it so much and they want to take it. So I just make sure to have more than one. Let's stay with it for a moment, and from the perspective that we're entertaining, tell me what you see. And as an extra challenge, also tell me, again, from the perspective we've been discussing, what about this doesn't go all the way? What about this isn't completely right?
Is it the eyes?
Yes. They're making eyes into an ultimate.
And the
Of course,
ultimate, oh, sorry,
go ahead.
the ultimate is not the ultimate. It has a shape relative to the other part of the picture, especially the hands.
Yeah, so I was going to say something I think similar to what you meant. I appreciate the artistic liberty here, right? This essence of a viewer from before the agenda and the mask, just this essence of awareness. It's all pervasive and that exists before any relative perspective. It's good to be able to, the more we have this, let's call it epistemological flexibility, the more we de-reify ontology, the more we can look at anything and see all of the perspectives, see more perspectives that might be useful. Of course, if it's art, it's just enjoyable, or it's a teaching moment, it's inspiring. If it's in the world and we're looking at some conflict, the ability to not have those foundations in the psyche is what lets us be empathetic. It's what lets us see the other person's perspective. And then generate a perspective that's more useful. I'm going to leave the word useful standing as is for everyone involved. Just to a continuous understanding of what we've talked about and is very neatly exemplified in this image.
If the eyes were like kind of everywhere and not as eye-like, is that still rarefied?
Well, the reification is always in the eyes of the beholder. and no version of this picture would be ultimately true.
That's fair.
The best thing we can do is have skillful pointers.
Okay.
So one of my favorite words in Pali, perhaps my favorite word, is upaya. That translates into skillful means, or what is the lie that is most appropriate in the moment with a particular person in a particular situation. What is the best lie that points at truth? So there are actually some people where I would say in a one-on-one, sense the eyes that exist before you. Well, there's the famous Zen koan, show me your true face before even your parents were born. But then for another person, I'd be like, what? There's no eyes. Where do you see eyes? So nothing is ultimately true. We're dealing with a system of liberation and freedom. Soteriology. What's the thing that I can say that's gonna enlighten most people per minute? And for those of you who have read them, you can see in the suttas, almost all of them end with some student or like a whole class of people, and the student was enlightened. Right? Otherwise, what's the point of the Buddha saying all of this? Someone comes in with a question, the Buddha gives exactly the right sermon, and the student is just, oh, nothing's true. Any other questions or comments before we move on? So one more little exercise that I want to do is talking about what is the counterpart of emptiness which is something that Culadasa used to place the highest emphasis on, and that's the interdependent nature of all things. In Pali, sometimes referred to as pratitya samuppada, which sometimes also corresponds to or is a pointer used for the 12 links of dependent origination. Points at the same thing. So if we each choose one of our favorite ultimate words, right, like true or ultimate or is, let's take a minute, and try to pick it apart, not just in terms of seeing, the word true, does the vibrations that my throat is making, and those are stored in an echo in my mind's ear. But really see what it breaks down to. What is the chain of meanings that the word depends on? How did it come to be? Maybe there'll be a memory of the person who first told me this word and emphasized it in a particular way that's like really stuck in my mind with a host of sensations and emotions and meaning and some way that I'm holding about it. It's true. This is real. So find a word and it's like pick it apart. What are the sensations? What's the memory? What comes up? See how that's the web that holds it together. Interdependently existing. Yeah.
What if nothing comes up? Then what?
Then I would say offline, increase the capacity of your collectedness and unspin the mind, which is the thing we're going to talk about in a minute.
I suppose like maybe like a doubt that I have when someone sort of like asks me a question like that, like sort of like what is true, and like notice, how everything is dependent. Like how do I know that what comes up in my mind is related to that concept rather than maybe just like some other random noise? Like how do I distinguish? How do I make
Yeah.
sure that it's not just like, noise?
Yeah. A great question. Ultimately, it doesn't matter so much, right? It's like a game of association in some way, right? Like I'm saying grandma. I was like, what comes up? Oh, maybe a picture of her house. Maybe just the sky is blue. And you're like, is it coming up because the sky is blue now? It doesn't matter so much. And as you do this practice more, you learn to feel the subtle like information ties in the body mind. You have a sense of if you've seen one of those graphs where you have a word and then there's a graph, like a network showing related words and meanings, you start being able to sort of glimpse that. It's like a flash of all the things. And you also see how all of those things are overlaid on top of the freshly arising reality. And the mind is doing the thing that we were discussing last time, which is smashing together both the top down interpretation and meaning onto the freshly arising reality. And if it's a thought that's really removed from what's happening right now, like I'm asking you, think about what happened at one time in third grade, and you were with eyes open, you can see how like splashes of color and sound and kinesthetic feeling just like suddenly appear on the foundation of this present moment. It's just like colors over it. So I'm going to leave you with that. I don't want to spend more time on this, but consider anytime you think something is inherently existent, independently existing, try to break it up to everything that it's related to. Any emotion, any thought, anything in the world that anyone is fighting over, anything that you think is at stake for your life. And not by way of making it not real or not existent, just seeing the interdependent nature. And remember, this is not about lack of nature. It's just lack of inherent nature. And we see, and this is where the wisdom is, the interdependent nature. All right, let's move on. So generally, this is a process of deconstructing or de-reifying the mind. When I say reify, I mean this taking some sensations and collecting them into a thing. We reify, we make it real, we sort of put it on a pedestal, right? Truth. And unspinning is any type of activity that lets us shave down a few of the nested loops, right, of spinning, meaning making. And often all that's required is the type of practice that we did at the beginning, or many other practices that just relax our nervous systems a little bit, or put our bodies in a posture that doesn't require as much tension to be held. And that's a lot of why in the practice book, I advise starting every practice before any other technique with the heart rate variability breathing. It just tends to regulate the whole system. It tends to change the the physiological operation into parasympathetic mode, to something that's a little more like nicely humming along. Our capacity to really construct worlds within worlds depends on our entire physiology amping up and using a lot of energy. And that's not bad by itself. It's just that, and this will be the topic of the next chapter, why we hate, in a mind that's not trained, depends on a lot of activation that's not harmonious. So it's like not just a lot of activity, but also a conflict. Like all of those islands of meanings are trying to capitalize on the resources of the nervous system, and they're continually dancing at odds, very high frequency and tension. So just taking a few breaths, relaxing, already starts unspinning the mind. And so what we want to do is sort of what we did at the beginning practice today. Just relax whatever is freely capable of relaxing, and then seeing what is still active, what is still an edge, what is still tense, what is not dissolving into what you can get to after a long period of emptying out the mind or collecting it. Or the more you're in a higher base and generally deconstructed, just like immediately by dissolving, which is an undifferentiated, peaceful, and blissful state. Anything that's refusing to rest this way, anything that's spitting out all sorts of frictions, is something that has something true and is at stake and is having a hard time letting go. So first we unspin, and then we start doing progressive practices of emptiness. And I'll say, Jonathan, as a callback to earlier, I much prefer this notation of basis of operation because they're defined in this way that we talked about in the levels of mind as related to the wisdom in the mind, collectedness, and lack of attachment, which is much more quantifiable and precise than are you having an emptiness experience? Once we have those factors and we can talk about levels, then we can be much more precise about what's the next practice to do. What's the right instruction for the person? Okay, so this is me just plugging basis of operation again. And let's see what here we've not talked about. Okay, I think we just have this one last major part that will lead us into our final inquiry. Any more questions before we go into that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So sometimes when meditating in the way you describe in the practice book, I will relax and then I feel that I'm hitting upon something that refuses to relax, that wants to reify itself. And I wonder what's the most productive way to deal with that, because sometimes it feels like trying to relax the body even more helps with accepting it and like feeling it through. And sometimes like it feels like letting the waves of tension ride out feels more productive. And yeah, I don't know which way is right. It depends on the situation, but I would like some pointers.
Yeah. So if you want to discuss this deeper, let's jump on a call. But briefly, I'll say it's as you say. There's no right answer. Like ultimately, for the things that bug us the most, it's very common that we throw our entire toolbox at them, right? If you get to the highest basis that you have available, and you feel the mind is collected, and it's a space that feels safe, and and that's not enough, then you're like, okay, let's try inquiry. Let's try feeling it in the body even more. Let's see where the tension is. Let's try to let the tension do the movement that it wants to do. There's countless tools, and I hope to cover as many of them as in the practice book as I can. For now, I'll go back to trust your wisdom. See what you can do, and also notice if you're possibly trying too hard. Right? That can also, if we come at something from a place of, oh, okay, this is something that I have to solve, right? That can only increase the tension. Versus the practice that we more so did at the beginning, which is like, let's relax into a loving space. Sometimes that's enough.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Hakomi style approaches where instead of trying to disable something or get underneath it or push it aside, it's going in and supporting it with curiosity and love and letting it unfold however it does.
Yeah. Okay. So one more image that I want to show. I think this might be obvious to all of you at this point. I do like this example. This is the word empty. You see my mouse cursor? In the upper left corner, this is my phone taking a picture. Sorry, this is a print screen of a Word document where I wrote the word empty. This is my phone taking a picture of the screen. And my phone picking up much more of the pixels on the screen. And this is this image blown up, just zoomed in. Right? So just zooming in, or even here, changing the perspective, makes it easier to see that it's not just a few letters, right? E-M. It's composed of subcomponents, which are composed of subcomponents. And this whole lattice on the screen is just a few pixels having a limited range of possible values to compose into something that we have a very easy time disappearing into the meaning of. If we can see reality through the pixels or come closer to it, we have much more freedom in terms of both interpreting reality and composing it into shapes that are more skillful, that are more relevant on our path of surviving and thriving as a human. Okay. So I want to take you through, how much time do we have? 23 minutes. I want to take you through what's essentially the core loop of deconstructing the mind. And it's going to involve what we call waking up, cleaning up, and growing up. So I generally don't like talking about too much. I prefer to point at the underlying principles, but good to also connect that with that notion. So every loop in this nested, incepted chain of samsaric spinning, pancha, is glued in place because there's a particular feeling, particular host of sensations that we have learned during development, during the mind constructing itself into what it is today, being seen as bad or harmful or difficult or challenging. In the previous chapters, I described this as the highest move that we could make at the time. Because often that signal that was coming through was so overwhelming, there was a risk of it just completely taking over the system and preventing other acts of coordination from keeping us alive and well. But from the higher perspective of an adult that we have today, we can go through this cleanup process where we find every part, every aspect of us that's locked away because it's associated with expressing a particular signal, a particular emotion, a particular feeling, a particular group of sensations anywhere in the body mind. So far, so good, right? Okay. And in the 12 links of dependent origination, this corresponds to the link between feeling, Vedana, and craving, tanha. And the classic Buddhist instruction in the first turning is cut the link between Vedana and tanha, so that instead of Vedana leading to tanha, Vedana leads to panya. Vedana leads to wisdom. And much of how craving expresses itself, right? We have this loop that generates a particular feeling, right? We have this loop. Then in this point where there's feeling, if we don't identify the feeling correctly and feel it all the way, it will spawn another loop that happens here. If we do identify the feeling and just stay with it, with the wisdom of it, we feel the feeling all the way through without the stories, or at least without grabbing onto the stories. We simply by feeling it through and not giving it some label of bad or shouldn't be or going away to the story, take away the fuel from the loop, and that is cleaning up. We clean up all the dark corners in our psyche that have been pushed away because of this decision that they're a priori bad. The ultimate truth is that these sensations are not good. To keep them at bay. So we take the sting away, we take the fuel away from the loop. And then what we call waking up is just doing this all the way down. We take away the sensation from this loop, and then the loop below, and the loop below, and the loop below, until there are no loops left. Till we hit the ground floor of nirvana. But we also have another thing that's available to us, which is once we see the structure, the loops that generate a particular feeling, we can also see what the purpose of this generation is. Often we generate a feeling, generate an emotion, behavior related to those as a way of meeting our needs. So for example, if I'm a baby and I'm crying and mom comes and gives me food, I learn that being sad equals food. Or even more generalized, I learned that being sad someone taking care of me. But if what I learned that being sad makes daddy come and slap me, I won't be sad. I'll do something else. Maybe I'll be miserable. Or I'll shut down. Or I'll be angry. So then we learn to take care of our needs through other people by being angry or being sad or being miserable. And so what happens if we strictly go on the path of waking up, or even if we clean up in a way that makes the feeling okay, we can still stay with more loops than what otherwise would be necessary. Because if my loop is, I have a need for care, I have a need to be seen by other people, and my strategy is, oh, I'll be miserable. Then there's a loop of, okay, first of all, I have to hurt myself. I have to feel not so good. Even if on a meta level, I know that those feelings are empty and I'm okay with them, right? There's no suffering, at least in some level of this definition. I am hurting myself. I'm constantly generating some emotion, like I'm miserable. I have to be in a space and place. I have to be in a circumstance where I can show some person this misery. Often this misery is also sent at them, right? In a way that's kind of icky. They have to have the programming to respond to misery with care, right? Maybe though they are the ones who are programmed to respond to misery with violence, or they only know how to care for people who are sad. Then they have to take care of my needs or see me, care for me in a way that's associated with what, when I was a baby, was associated with part of the act of coordination that has misery, this whole loop taking into account, so that I might not even see the type of care that comes at me, right, through this more narrow lens. And I have to have some basic awareness that I was only miserable because I wanted care from other people. Later on in the second part of the book, I make the claim that any mental structure naturally wants to expand its purview. So if we learn that misery is a useful thing to do in the world, we get care this way, suddenly we start doing misery everywhere else. So even if we get the care or the sense of being seen from other people based on misery, that's not a guarantee that the misery will stop. So even if we've woken up beyond misery, right, we're able to deconstruct all of that and abide in some peaceful state, even in nirvana. It might only be available to us if we're in a cave. As soon as we meet a person, all of those programs start happening, even if we see them from a perspective that's very empty, where it's not bad. I'm not identified with it. I'm not suffering from it. It's just papancha. And that's where the practice of growing up comes. You can even say conscious evolution, creating a more developed way to get our needs met. By develop, what I mean is generally requires less energy and or allows for more complex behavior. And I'm saying complex, not complicated. This loop of misery and getting our needs met, that's complicated. Because instead of being miserable, right, I did not have words. I could not express myself. I did not have agency in the world. But that was just the beginning of my agency, learning to cry. I could just go to the person that I want to connect with and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you. Or, oh, I need some help with this. It's very meaningful for me. And then you know that the thing that aligns people with you is finding shared values, or finding the perspective that's harmonious and resonant between the two of you. Instead of like, and being a little baby terrorist, or being an adult terrorist, just say, here's what I need, and here's why it's worthwhile for you to play with me in achieving this goal, in helping me meet my needs. let's go through the whole overview again. If we have parts of our psyche that are in the shadow, that are in the unconscious, pushed away, suppressed, rejected, it's always because there's some feeling we've not allowed ourselves to feel. It was too dangerous to feel. Or we were just slapped for expressing the natural behavior that stems from that feeling, anger or misery or what have you. And we just go there, and in the container of the adult self that we have now, we just allow that feeling to be exactly as it is, and we feel it through. We integrate that part into the psyche. We allow it to be in conscious awareness. Waking up is just going through this loop all the way down to the ground floor, to fundamental consciousness, so that no construct, no loop is reified. And the more we clean up, the more we allow everything to be, the easier it is. Sometimes things can feel bad. We still have not fully integrated them, but through what's more of a waking up type of attitude, which is dispassion, disidentification, we just allow them to be. It's more like a meta layer, a meta way of being okay with it. But then if we grow up, we evolve the mechanism, we can go beyond any type of sensation that's classically unpleasant. Even if we're okay with the unpleasantness, there's a way to go beyond even self-generating sensations that are unpleasant. Because generally speaking, and this is a claim I'm making, and I'll just bookmark it and put aside, the structures of mind that generate unpleasant sensations are doing so because they're tugging at the machinery that is used to give us actual signals of pain from the world, whether internal or external. And they learn to do it to get our attention. They learn to do it because needs, deeply programmed in our psyche, know that if they press that button, they get attention. Right? So we teach them not to press the button that creates unpleasant sensations, unpleasant feelings. And both create something that's nicer in terms of how the body and mind does itself, and more skillful, both internally and externally with the world. How does this all land?
I'm getting a little bit confused with the interchangeable use of feeling, emotions, sensations, because I thought feelings are Vedana, which only have 3 values. Emotions are what you say, misery, and I don't know, sadness, and so on. So I'm trying to sort it out when I listen to you, and I'm not sure I understand how you use all those words.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's bring some order to this. Sensation, I mean the thing before any interpretation, before we call it a feeling, before we call it emotion. It's just the pixels in the body mind, or any definition. Feeling generally, if I'm being careful with my language, is more pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Emotion is the thing that has more of an affect. If I'm crying, my face does this. If I'm angry, there's like a lot of energy, right? There's some motion involved with it. It's a greater act of coordination. It has some meaning that's generated from the cognizing that I've done and the feeling, right? So you could see sensation, feeling, and emotion as a progression of construction. When I sort of use them interchangeably, I want to point out at the constructed nature of all of them, because ultimately, even sensations, right? Even as I'm saying, these are the least constructed. Sensations come on the backdrop of a construct of a body. Or you could say sensations are conditioned by the previous moment of consciousness. It's hard to fully define all of these. This is why I love the 12 links of dependent origination, because it really shows all the not just the 12 links sort of in a circle, but also the loops between the things and the way that everything defines the other thing. It's a fun project to really tease all of this out and make sure you understand every part.
Thank you.
Can I just ask about the 12 links? I've only ever seen sort of like a diagram on the Wikipedia article illustrating the 12 links, and it's all pretty cryptic and mysterious. Sort of like I'm only really familiar with the 5 aggregates and
Yeah.
sort of like this more simplified version. So maybe could you say a few words about like the 12 of them, like the big model? And if there's any way
That
to
will be a whole session.
no, but like maybe is there like some resource I could read about it in a more sort of like sensible language that is not
Yeah, the thing that I like the most is this thing that someone at TWIM created. This is incredible. Really fleshes everything out. So you have all the links and the definitions and the way that they loop one another. I'll ask Delson if there's a way I can send like a PDF or something.
no,
See
that
if I
would
can.
be really cool. Yeah.
Because I'm with you. There's no good source. And a lot of my understanding, like the more complete understanding of it that I have now, which is far better than I've always had, is strictly thanks to Delson, who's just who understands and sees this directly through and through.
Yeah.
So I'll see if I can get you something.
Thanks.
Anything else? Do you understand the distinction that I'm trying to make between cleaning up, waking up, growing up? And also the way that it doesn't matter like doing this so much. It's a choice about where to go. And ultimately the thing that I'm more interested in the book is this process of conscious evolution and what fuels it. Yeah, I know this was a lot and quite dense. So I don't expect you to be fully on with it. I'll post the notes that I have in the YouTube description, and hopefully this and the video being available will be helpful. But for now, if there's any other question about this, let me know. If not, we'll do our final inquiry. And Jonathan is writing in the chat that Lee Brasington's book on dependent origination is great. On Lee's website. Okay, ready for our last inquiry for today? So from this framing of looping, consider the nature and essence of a compulsive thought. Why does a particular thought keep coming up? Right? Sometimes we have a thought just once. It comes up, it delivers its payload, and then it keeps going. And it just dissolves. So for the most part, I could say always, but let's keep it a little bit more humble. For the most part, if you have a thought that keeps coming up again and again and again, exactly the same way, there is some feeling that we're avoiding. And generally here, I would even say there's an emotion that we're avoiding. And each of you, conscious evolution warriors that you are, I'm sure know yourselves well enough to also know which emotion or emotions are particularly hard for you to feel, what's been beaten out of you. So try and find some thought that keeps coming up multiple times per day, or even if it just comes up every day, especially if it feels like it's not really resolved, and it's like it comes up and you're like, well, just makes you a little miserable. Then take a moment to see, just through the simple inquiry, what emotion am I avoiding? What's the emotion underlying this thought? And I do find that there's truth in the general wisdom that for women, it's the more activating emotions, like anger, general mobilization of the system. For men, it's the ones that are more letting go, which is what sadness, grief, helplessness brings. And for both, perhaps one of the hardest emotions to feel, hardest general states to be in, is heartbreak. It's just the sense of heartbreak that comes up when you fully allow yourself to face that this is how it is. If you have a hard time finding the emotion, then bring up the thought and see where it lands in the body, where something tightens, tenses, where there's just confluence of sensations. From there, you do emotional inquiry. You tune into that area, curiosity with tenderness. Feel the friction that exists between that and the surrounding tissue. Feel into the edges. You explore it from the inside out and inside in and outside in. I'm hurrying a little bit because we're close to running out of time, but this is, of course, something you can do 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The deeper this emotion is buried and suppressed, the longer we'll have to stay with it from a place of expanded, accepting, loving awareness. And the more having felt this emotion used to be unsafe, used to herald danger, the more we want to create a safe space for it. Maybe even with the company of friends or a therapist, any circumstance that would help us feel safe. And there's a particular feeling of clarity and freedom when the emotion underneath is fully felt. Sometimes that could also be a movement or some sound. But generally, there's an openness. There's a type of relief that unburdens the whole system. So let's take a couple more moments just to explore how this was for you and answer any last questions before we end for today.
it was really helpful and calming for me. That just said that for some things you just have to stay with them for a while and try to have this loving like space for them to unfold in, because there are emotions that I keep coming back to in my meditations, and sometimes there's frustration about that, but chewing, or well, not chewing through, but seeing the same things again and again, and like not really knowing where there's an end to it. And so just hearing you say, well, some things just take a while, that was quite helpful. So thank you.
For completion, I'll say if you feel the emotion and it doesn't feel like it's resolving, it doesn't feel like there's an opening and an integration of what was there, it's also possible that the emotion is itself the escape into a lot of loop from an emotion that's underneath it. So often people can cry and cry and cry and cry, but they're looping in place, and the cry is it's still like it's closed. There's like a type of thing that happens versus a cry that cleanses. Really, emotions, and particularly the more we have freedom and fluidity with them, exhaust themselves very quickly. If something comes up again and again and again, we've either not felt it all the way, not listened to it all the way. Sometimes there's also a payload of wisdom, or the emotion itself is the escape. So I'm trying to give you something here in a few minutes that, it's a whole class, but I want to at least give you the bookmarks and threads to pull on for further exploration.
So I'm just curious, if the emotion is the escape, then should you look beyond it, or should you try to sort of like get it out of the way first? What would you say?
So first, see that you're okay and accepting and even loving of this emotion. And then do the same process. Like, oh, what's the emotion I'm escaping by this with this emotion? And often what you would have is story, hard emotion, like anger or frustration, soft emotion, could be grief, tenderness, and then under this, just undifferentiated sensations. You want to get to the point where, as you're feeling the soft, or it can be also a few layers of this. When you feel the soft emotion, you also can just tune into the sensations and not hold on to the story. Oh, this is sadness. Oh, this is because blah blah. Just allow the sensations, right? And this corresponds to seeing it from the highest basis of operation. Right? So instead of holding the higher base, just for this one thing, we're letting go of all assumptions. So it's like the equivalent, like the local higher base, right? And then we don't do all the slicing and the composing, and allow all sensations.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you pointing out that heartbreak can often be what's actually underneath was like a punch to the gut, and that was interesting, noticing the moment in which the pointer kind of opened up greater access to those sensations.
Yeah.
And also seemed like a pointer toward impermanence.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's useful to say it's heartbreak all the way down. Anything else before we close for today?
I was wondering for the thoughts piece, is it important to see the thoughts embedded in the emotions or the pushing away of emotions, and not just the feeling of it? But then also sometimes it can become a like, now you're just following thoughts.
Now you're just what?
Following thoughts. Now you're just looping with thoughts, or like trying to do something with it. I guess maybe mainly it's my first question. Yeah, what do you want to do with thoughts and concepts?
Often in the emotion, through this exploration, there would be wisdom that comes up even in the form of a thought. And it may be that the thing that I'm escaping using the emotion is an understanding underneath that I regret my action towards someone, or that I really want to connect with a person, or that I really don't like the job that I have. And instead of doing something here, I'm looping in this emotion or story or whatever it is. Right? So part of the jumping from feeling from Vedana to Panya to wisdom is not just the wisdom of emptiness, so to speak, it's also the wisdom of, oh, I did something that's not in alignment with the greater system that's creating conflict in me. And so the thought can come up, here's what I can do to come back into alignment. And through that, it can also be more thoughts like, oh, okay, I'll pick up the phone and call them tomorrow. And before that, I'll talk with my other friend to support us. And right. So this is more about learning and knowing yourself and seeing what thoughts are productive in this regard. What is a process that implies going towards greater wholeness, deeper alignment, that are in themselves a manifestation of the evolution of the system, versus if I'm just looping again, like, I'm regretting how I spoke to this person, but they deserved it, and they did that too, and this is what's right in this culture, right? It's like, oh, I want to connect with them. I want them to like me. I want to feel okay in this connection. Make sense?
Mhm.
Great. All right. So the next chapter that we have is going to be the second part of Spinning in Samsara, with the provocative title, Why We Hate. It's one of my favorite chapters. And unfortunately, we will not, we won't do it next week. I'm going to go visit family. So at least for the next, I have some uncertainties, at least for the next 2 weeks, we will not meet. So we're not going to have a session on the 26th and the 2nd. We may have it on the 9 and 16, but I will just update in the group. And as far as advanced as I can. We're going to go on a bit of a summer vacation. I'm still available for questions and for continued discussion in the group. And I'll have some times available for one-on-ones. And if not, feel free to message me and we'll find a time. Beautiful being with you all today. Coming. And may you empty out all of the junk that's persistently tensing up your mind.